To begin this, we're going to have a two-person on-stage discussion between two of the people who, in their respective realms, practically embody the fact of connectedness and all of its implications for the world. One of these, I'll introduce them and I'll ask you to join me in welcoming them both to the stage. One of these, of course, is John Chambers, the chairman and CEO of Cisco. And on his 12-year watch as CEO, the company's revenues have risen nearly 25-fold. He has been recognized in practically every way a corporate leader could be recognized, including most recently a very prestigious award from Corporate Excellence given by the U.S. Secretary of State. He'll be joined by Thomas Friedman, the longtime reporter and columnist for the New York Times, the three-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize, recently a leading advocate of the geo-green concept about national security, and the author of many, many books, one of which, The World is Flat, has sold more than 3 million copies worldwide. In a recent discussion with Tom on TV, I calculated that meant there were about 1 billion pages of his thoughts on this subject extant in the world, and at current rates, he'll be the first person to have a Google of his pages published around the world. So I'd like you please to join me in welcoming John Chambers and Thomas Friedman to talking about Even the Corporation Has Become Flat.
Jim, thank you. It's a treat to be here this morning with John. John and I have been having this conversation actually for a long time. It actually started, John, you won't remember, but I did a column, I think it was 1995. I did a column on the G8 and this meeting of global powers, Italy, Canada, economic powers. And I did a column where I said, what if the G8 actually was made up of companies and individuals who are really important? And I thought, well, who would be in it? And if you remember this, I put Cisco back in there in 1995.
We thank you very much.
Unfortunately, I didn't buy your stock, but
it's never too late to correct that.
What I thought I'd like to begin with this morning, people often ask me, sort of where is this flattening going? Where is the Web 2.0 going? And whenever I think about where we are now, I think of what has become for me the iron rule of business in the flat world. And for me, the iron rule of business is when the world is flat, whatever can be done will be done. Whatever can be done will be done. The only question is, will it be done by you or to you? And I see evidence of this more and more in the kind of amazing mix-em-match-em combinations that both individuals and companies are putting together to create global businesses. I was down in Peru last year with my wife. We were on an eco tour, and at one point our guide, Alfredo Ferreas, was telling me about a friend of his who's selling Peruvian dishware on the internet from a village near Cusco. Wonderful, the world is flat. Then he added this, he's now looking to see if he can get his dishes made cheaper in China. Okay. Whatever can be done will be done. You better do it before it's done to you. Another example I give is I was in Hungary last year, Budapest, and at a conference at the Central European University. They gave me a driver when I was there to meet me at the airport and take me back. We were going back on a Sunday morning, early 7 o'clock, and on the way to the airport, he said to me, Mr. Tom, if you have any friends who are coming to Budapest, would you tell them about me? I have driving services, tourism, business, diplomatic driving. I said, I'd be happy to. How do they give me your phone number? He said, no, just go to my website. So I said, you have your own website? And he gave me his card. When I got home, I looked it up. I wrote about this in the book. It was in Magyar, German, and English with music. Beautiful pictures of all his vehicles and opportunities. And suddenly I was reminded of something Secretary of State Baker said to me. I'd covered him as a reporter after he resigned. He said, how do you know you're out of office in Washington, D.C.? You know you're out of office in Washington, D.C., John, when your limousine is yellow and your driver speaks Farsi. How do you know you're in a flat world when your Hungarian cab driver has his own website in Magyar, German, and English with music? From your point of view, John, how do you see this whatever can be done will be done, and you better do it before it's done to you in your universe at Cisco?
Tom, like many of the themes that you write about, I would use a different path to get there or different words, but the concept is exactly right. It might surprise many people in the audience. We don't focus on competition at all. I focus on trying to get the market transition right, ideally 3 to 5 years before it's obvious, and you purely use competition as a way of measuring your success or not in terms of market share. And if I were to use some examples specific to the area to add credibility to it, if you think of our competition in my terms of as a router or a switch or a data center or the home network or wireless, you go after it in either a fast follower mode or an individual product. If you think about it with any device to any content anywhere in the world where you don't care whether it was a router or a switch or wired or wireless implementation from your home, at work, in the hotel, then you approach it architecturally. And we bet a large part of our future on that being the market transition that would occur. Another very tangible example was moving into emerging markets where the traditional logical thinking was as you do that, you get top-line growth, but you had to invest for 3, 5 years or beyond to get bottom-line growth. We basically used collaboration, empowered a team to say your two requirements are top-line growth more than 30% and bottom-line growth and margins identical to the developed world in 12 months. And after the discussion was, well, that can't be done, they went out and collaborated together better than our top leadership could do, and they grew last year at 45% and with identical margins to everywhere else in the world, 1 year after their implementation.
What's it like, though, making this transition from a CEO point of view? You came to Cisco at a time when the model was command and control.
Yes.
You're now presiding over a model of connect and collaborate. You move from vertical to horizontal. It sounds great on paper. We're all going to collaborate now, and all of us are smarter than one of us. What's it like to manage it?
It took 7 years to even begin to take what I'd call small steps to really make it go well. It's like many things in life. If you realized how difficult it was, you might not have moved as aggressively on it. I'm clearly a command and control leader. And I like the idea of turn right, 67,780 people turn right remarkably quick. We are very good at that. But it was very obvious that if the ideas came either from the CEO or head of business development or chief development officer, that would limit our growth, and we wouldn't be able to move into 1 or 2 product areas or 1 or 2 market areas and not be able to expand beyond traditional products, which is what causes most great companies to stall out in terms of their future. And so we started down this path in 2001, and candidly, my senior leadership team hated it. It required thinking differently. You bring representatives. Any 2 of your top executives could lead the concept on your enterprise strategy or your strategy in service provider. And then each function had to ante up somebody that could speak for the whole function. And they were to set the strategy of the company. I might help them on the vision, but they had to set the strategy and the execution, and then over time would take responsibility for the vision. The first 2 years were a miserable failure. The classic approach, well, if it doesn't report to me, how do I make it happen? And then secondly, all right, John, it doesn't need to report to me, give me control over budget. And then the third element, one of the hardest lessons learned is many of the really strong players were so indoctrinated in their success and personality and command and control, they couldn't make the transition, and we need to just evolve them over time.
They evolved.
It was a combination, yes.
Interesting.
And that's hard to do, especially when that's a really talented person. And you know how good they are. It's like a basketball player, 7 foot, that can really jump, shoot, dribble, pass, but you can't get them to play the team. And all of a sudden, it allowed us to achieve the results. And just for people in the room, again, out of in what is normally 2 or 3 product areas, most high-tech companies have great gross margins and good growth. We have it in 2 dozen. And we're gaining market share in almost all product categories, and we make them profitable remarkably quickly.
And you're attributing it, John, to this collaborative model where individuals will emerge within each team, basically, and in
Yes.
fact take responsibility for it. What is the secret of that sauce? That if you were advising people here,
Yes.
how do you organize that? What would you say are the most 1 or 2 important things you need to keep in mind?
It's a good question, because as we learned over time, it's almost like a fairly complex algebraic equation. You solve one of the variables and you realize, ooh, I hadn't thought of this one. So you had to teach it over time, and we had to teach it in our development classes because candidly the schools don't prepare us for that, and our success was not there. We had to change compensation.
How so?
We changed the compensation to where a sizable part of the compensation was based upon how your peers that you had to work with evaluated you. And many people thought we were bluffing the first year, and I had 2 of my best executives get 0 bonus for that element. It cost them about 30% of their bonus. And part of it was me learning. I needed to learn to empower, and even when we started down the path, I thought each of these groups would be led by senior VPs of a functional group. I've now realized that you can have VPs or even directors leading senior VPs. So it turns this organization structure not only flat, it turns it on its head. And then getting comfortable with that, and at first you know what the answer needs to be because you touch so many points in the company. When you empower a team, you could say, well, wait a minute, this is where you're going to end up. And learning to sit back and let them go through that. And at first, it took them a lot longer to get to probably where I thought they should. Then within a couple years, they make dramatically better decisions than I would have made or the operating committee would make. And that was humbling. But then you realize instead of doing 1 or 2 major things a year, I can do 2 dozen. And I don't need to tell anybody in the room what that means if we're right on this concept. And that's what we're attempting to do. It's all around collaboration, Web 2.0 enablement.
What would I notice as a customer? I approach you know,
Yes.
Cisco today as opposed to Cisco 7, 8 years ago.
Yes.
Ring your doorbell, say, John, you know, I need a, you know, internet, phone system, I need routers, whatever it is. What would I notice most as a customer?
The breadth and depth of where we play and moving from selling boxes, hopefully good boxes, to understanding more about solutions and playing architecturally across the market. Probably listening better about how do you provide solutions as opposed to how you just move bits around the world. And an ability to, far from perfect, but to speak their language and listen and bounce back the ideas off of them. One of the hardest things we all do as a leadership team is the time to change is when everything's going well. It's not once you're in trouble. And while we've all learned over time to adjust to the trouble, the way you stay out of it is to change when it is going well. And so getting successful organizations to change, and change that makes everyone in this room uncomfortable, especially the CEO when things are going well, is a core part of it as well.
How do you deal with it when, though, in effect, a lot of companies today describe themselves as being in the solutions business?
Yes.
Microsoft's in it, Google's in it, AT&T is in it, Huawei's in it. How do you avoid bumping in to all these people around you?
I'm not sure you can avoid the bumps. In fact, if you believe, and I firmly am a believer in this and obviously very biased, that the mere nature of work and the nature of entertainment will completely change. Not where you work, how you work, what devices you use. I'm talking the concept of work. Collaboration in ways that our kids admit in the social networking will occur. It says by definition, if I'm in the networking business and expanding where it makes it virtual, not only where the processes are in the data center, but whether they're in your home, where the applications reside, storage, we will be in many areas that our peers and often people we work very closely with will be in. And the same thing is true. The application vendors, the Oracles, the SAPs, the Microsofts, the Googles, the customers of Verizon's, et cetera, all of us will have bumps ideally around the edges. My personal approach has always been I'd rather make the pie bigger, do it an open standard, and have a smaller percentage of the pie, but candidly more revenue and profits by definition. We'll see if that plays out the way that I hope it will.
John, another thing you and I have talked about, again, that I've really noticed in this flatter Web 2.0 world is that economic competition is certainly between countries and countries still exists, China versus America versus India. Competition between companies still exists, Cisco versus Huawei versus Juniper. But the thing that's striking me more and more is that the most important competition in the world, I think increasingly, is going to be between you and your own imagination. Because in this flat world where individuals are now so connected, have so many individual tools of creativity and the ability to globalize their ideas and concepts as individuals. What individuals matter, individual employees, individual managers, is really going to matter. Do you see that at Cisco?
I'll make a little bit of a controversial statement, and Tom, if you and the people in the audience agree with everything I've said today, I will fail miserably, because we're learning as we go, and that's new for me too. I usually have my complete battle plan in place before I take step one, and I play out in the senior team how we execute over 5 to 7 years. This is moving so fast, you have to evolve it as you go forward. Imagination is really important, but we use a different word. I don't move into a new market adjacency unless there is a transition going on. That can be economic. It can be convergence of data, voice, video over an IP network. It can be a void of innovation and productivity, which I think is occurring in the business world today. Our productivity in the U.S. from 96 to 2004 went from 1.5% to 5%, exactly like we told Dr. Greenspan would occur. But the last 3 years it's been down. And so as a CEO, you aren't going to spend a lot of money on IT unless you believe you're going to get productivity from it. And what Dr. Greenspan got us thinking about is without a new wave of innovation, that productivity doesn't occur. So I start with imagination is very important, but you've got to use imagination in a way that catches a market transition. So your vision of how that transition plays out. Then you've got to break it down into what is your sustainable differentiation within that vision. Because if you haven't got a sustainable differentiation, somebody in the world is going to out-execute you very rapidly. And fast followers all of a sudden become the leaders because they figure out what is their differentiation where you might have done a commodity-like play on it. And then third, you break it down into execution, what you occur over the next 12 to 18 months. So think of them as 12 to 18 months, 2 to 4 years, 5 years plus. The reason that was important for us is as you begin to use imagination, imagination without process and structure fails. And it's nice in concept, but all of a sudden, what starts out as a great whole bunch of ideas suddenly have to play together. And because you don't have a common vocabulary, a common way of approaching it, a common data architecture to share it, you stall yourself out. So we have actually, as we've done this, learned to get more discipline in parts of it and more imaginative in others. Having said all of the above, we used to run the company with the top 10 or 11 people. We're now running it with the top 300, rapidly on our way to running it with the top 3,000, and then maybe over time, the entire 67,000. The power of the and here is huge, and all of us understand the concept. The team does better than individuals, but that doesn't work without the enabling of innovation, ease of use, data, voice, video, virtual meetings, the Googles of the world, etc. Really, I think, leading the way in getting people.
We certainly all know about those virtual meetings and their necessity to get that kind of collaboration. Mm-hmm. Is that virtual meeting also now going into a new sphere?
Oh, yeah. It was interesting. About 14 months ago, I made 2 trips around the world, and 3 or 4 cities in China, 4 cities in India, into the Middle East, got called back to Washington, went to Washington, back to San Jose, back to Cleveland, over to Germany, back down through Eastern Europe, etc. I slept about 3 hours a night for 2 weeks, about killed me. I did that the other day in 2 3-hour sessions without leaving San Jose, and then worked a 10-hour day on top of it.
How?
Just with a concept called virtual meetings, telepresence. It isn't about video conferencing because I don't use that with customers. You don't. It's hard to use. Your voice isn't integrated. A virtual meeting, and I started in India with Bangalore with my own team. I then met with the Fujitsu top senior management, the entire senior management team of Fujitsu in Japan that I'd never met with before. So this issue you've got to do physically first before you consider anything virtually isn't accurate. Then went into Cleveland, then went to BT in London, then went to the key policy advisor in Kiev to the government. And that took just a short time. Yesterday, in a meeting with a very large customer, I was in San Jose, the customer was in the Midwest. We pulled in our team virtually from first from Atlanta, the Scientific Atlanta team. Then we pulled in the team from LA. Then I pulled in my team from New York, and then pulled in 2 additional teams on our campus. But it was like a meeting where you just literally walked in and had a seat. The minute the person talked, they came up, and it was 6 different locations. Now, every one of us in the room understands how I can suddenly focus my best resources in a collaborative style with the customer. But also, they do this without not just travel expenses and the issues on green environment with those, but you can really do a dozen of those a day as opposed to 2. And driving that further down in the organization faster than I thought we could, Tom. But the key lesson I learned is if you have to build the foundation first. If you don't build a strong foundation, teach your team how to do it, learn from your mistakes, and you learn more from your mistakes, you do your successes. It requires you to be uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable in the change, you're not moving fast enough. But that's, in my opinion, how you gain market share, how you become leaders in areas. And it's going to happen faster than people anticipate. It's like the internet. It was 30 years in existence, and then Cisco and many of our customers and partners suddenly said, let's enter orders online, let's do customer service, let's do core versus context, and it grew productivity for a decade. Then it slowed, as for the reasons we talk, and I think you're now about to see the next 5 to 10 years around the world with a huge productivity driver. But it requires collaboration with the innovation tools that make that collaboration easy and virtual around the world.
Let's talk about that.
And changing business models. It isn't just doing what you did before the same way.
Interesting. We're going to that new level, and what you're saying, John, is it's going to be a level that you'll thrive in if you can actually make 3,000 people managers or 5,000 people driving innovation markets.
As long as I can be ahead of my peers in doing it. If
That's
you're
gonna
just
be the key.
following, you're not going to have good growth, and you're not going to have good margins or market share.
Does it mean-
You could be early.
Did you need to have a different kind of CIO in order to manage than that kind of company?
You know, we just had a session with about 100 CIOs, some of the best around the world, in Florida. And what was fascinating is I asked my panel, all CIOs, majority of which came up through the IT ranks, will the next generation of CIOs be from the internal IT organization, or will they be business leaders coming in? And it shocked me, 5 out of 5 said business leaders coming in. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that, but it calls me, that's why you ask questions of customers and you learn thinking through it. My first 2 generations of CIOs were excellent. One was very creative and really led the path in the early 90s to turn things on its head in terms of how quickly we could service all of our customers by 93, 94 without human intervention over the internet with higher customer satisfaction than if they talked to a person. Now remember, that's 93, 94, not 2003, 2004. It allowed us to have the highest customer satisfaction, highest profitability and service. My next leader of the IT organization was very process-oriented, put the blocks in place remarkably well, but didn't have the same creativeness. This current leader, Rebecca Jacoby, who it took me 6 months to convince her to do it because she knew what it would be like working for me, probably not as pleasurable experience as I would have hoped. But as she told me, and she's very direct, which is part of the reason we get along, but she has the combination of the two. But she comes in from the business side, the ERP implementations, the quote to cash, but she's a change agent and she works pretty seamlessly across the board. And I think that may be the CIO of the future, a person who both knows the business side and the technology side. And I think you'll see that at one of the later groups, in Federal Express. You watch the CEO and CIO, they are in sync. You see the same thing at GE with Gary and Jeff, the same CEO, CIO in sync.
Just so I understand this, you're saying really that this next productivity leap is going to take us from that world of the Cisco helped pioneer of kind of one-to-many, the customer who can serve themselves.
One-to-one or one-to-machine.
But at one-to-machine to kind of many-to-machine, many-to-many? Is that
exactly? This is where Time Magazine got it wrong, Tom. When last year they named the Person of the Year was you, that was who it was in 2000.
You as in you too.
As you as a single person, or one-to-one or one-to-machine. Last year, the Person of the Year was us. It was about collaboration. Our kids nailed it with this social networking, this Facebook, YouTube, wikis, blogging, is exactly what we will do across our entire company with a structure. But we will change the structure to a flat organization. We will blog to start ideas, common bookmarks, Ciscopedia for our people to write about it, Facebook-like capabilities to say, here are the backgrounds of the people, YouTube clips to see what they're really like, click and talk to those experts. And instead of an ERP implementation took 3 to 5 years, you're talking about implementation takes less than 12 months. Now, a CEO lights up when they grasp that. And most CEO life expectancies aren't 4 to 5 years. So if you're a CIO going to the CEO talking to them about infrastructure and here's the processes and ERP, I'll get it for you in 4 years, they'll be polite, but then they're going to go out and now sales reps or move into market adjacencies or do acquisitions because I know I can get the productivity there. So if we don't find a way of capturing this new innovation, and this is where Dr. Greenspan really challenged me, he said, John, productivity will always run 1 to 2%. He said, you were right in 96 when you told us it was going to go from 1 to 2 to 5. And that lasted for 7 years. But you'll notice it's now back down. Unless there's something different. And this is where he got me rethinking innovation. And it isn't about imagination. It's about technology enabling that innovation at speeds and collaboration and ease of use that didn't exist before. So the majority of us will not instant message as our primary form of communication. It will be video. And you're seeing video just take off with tremendous speeds around the world, not at 50 to 100% growth in networks per year, but probably 2 to 300 being possible, probable, 3 to 500 very possible. But you had to see that 4 or 5 years ago. You had to develop the products for it, realizing that the purpose of your network products weren't to connect 1 billion phone calls for a single high-end router. It was to do tens of millions of videos. And you had to bet 7 years before it was obvious to the market.
Let's talk a little bit about the darker side of this, John. One of the things, again, I've noticed, I added a chapter in the updated version of my book. It's called What Happens When We All Have Dogs Hearing? And it's really about a world where everyone can now create their own content, so everyone can blog or whatever. They can In effect, everyone can be a journalist. Everyone has a cell phone enabled with a camera. Everyone, therefore, can be a paparazzi. And everyone now has access to YouTube. Everyone can be a filmmaker. In a world where everyone is a journalist, a paparazzi, and a filmmaker, everyone else is a public figure. And you are a public figure. You know how to handle that. You used to be written about, and it's sometimes not fun. But you know, it really struck me that a few years ago I was in Logan Airport in Boston, and I was going to buy a magazine at the magazine stand. I grabbed a magazine, newspaper. I walked over to the cash register. A woman was coming from this direction. I thought I got there first. I put my money down. She said, "Excuse me, I was here first." And she looked at me, "I know who you are." If that happened today, I'd say, "Ma'am, could I buy your magazines? Could I shine your shoes? Could I take you to lunch? Just don't blog about me or take my picture."
What did you say,
put it up on? I let her go first. I don't remember what I certainly didn't say anything. But what is it like running a company in such a flat world where the dishonorable accuser has enormous power?
Well, you got me thinking on this about 2 weeks ago when we talked about what we might want to discuss here. And to be very open with the group, when you first said it, I thought I had the answer, and then I realized I wasn't even close. Because we've learned to address a couple dozen bloggers who really have credibility and interfacing to them much as we would before, if you will, to the Wall Street Journal, to Fortune, to the New York Times, to other groups. But that isn't where it's going to be. Everybody, as you say, will be paparazzi. Everybody will have a camera with them, the videographer, if you will. Everyone will blog. And the concept that you said is, John, things that are wrong will just not have legs. However, that is so dangerous in my world because your reputation can take huge hits even if it doesn't last for a long period of time, and your ability to respond to it has to be different than before. And it's why I think as we think about all the strengths of about what we're about to see, I don't view the negatives as reasons not to do it because, as you said earlier in words that I'd use differently, it's going to happen anyhow. Right. It's much better to say, how do you influence what's going to occur? So I immediately went back to not my PR team, but my whole communication team and said, we've got to think about this differently. How we communicate with our employees when these hits occur. How do the employees self-check? How does PR handle it? How do our shareholders handle it? And this is work in process. In fact, I would say most of what this organization talks about today and tomorrow will be dramatic work in process with none of us exactly sure how it's going to end up. But if you don't collaborate and start down the path, you get left behind. But it did scare me because I did not have a good answer. Usually when you hit me with a concept, I can think through it quickly, word it differently, end up at the same place you did and said, I know how to influence that or I can adjust quickly. This one caused me to rethink.
The concept of we all have dogs hearing is that all these people are basically creating content now in digital form, and thanks to Google getting more and more perfect, you can now search that content more efficiently. So if I do go to Google and put in John Chambers and hit "I'm feeling lucky," I can hear everything whispered about you. Or if I put in Cisco there, I can hear everything whispered in the world about you. We all have dogs hearing.
But you said it right, Tom. You've gotten used to that. I've gotten used to it. However, for the company and to respond as a company, we are not at all used to it because it was normal personal in the first area.
Right.
Now it's starting to become very important to your brand, to your image, your importance on corporate social responsibility, your market share leadership. Do you compete honestly and ethically? And the concept of just saying, well, John, trust that over time people will come and defend you who need to do that. Well, that could take years to play out. And as we know, even in the prior world with very good journalists, it sometimes took many years to play out or it didn't play out entirely. And so it's a new concept. It's like any progress. There are challenges with it and downside. But I think looking at it from it's going to happen, how do you perhaps influence it as opposed to saying, well, it's bad, it shouldn't happen, let's try to prevent it. That won't occur in today's world.
John, it's kind of a cliche at any meeting like this discussing the technological universe right now that people bring up India and China. And, it's almost, as I say, you just assume a big, growing faster. What's going on there? Do we fully understand what is going on in China and India today in terms of the trend you're highlighting here?
The answer is I don't think so. I think people do underestimate that China and India will not be fast followers of what occurs in the U.S. or Europe or Japan.
Not be fast followers.
They will lead. They'll turn the business models on their head and direction. But if I can challenge a little bit in a fun way, that was the question from a couple years ago. The real message today is where are the emerging markets going? I had to make my bet in China 12 years ago. It was the first decision I made as CEO. I had to make my bet in India 5 years ago, and while we'll continue to evolve it, including major commitments at the end of this month, when I had to already decide what I was going to do, the emerging markets is where you get many of your creativity. So this is no longer a U.S. or Western Europe or China or India phenomena. It's every country in Eastern Europe. It's every country in the Middle East. It's Russia and the CIS states. It's Latin America. It's Africa. Progress that I haven't seen.
So Cisco had a foreign policy, John. Where would you say is hot right now in the emerging world? Some places are clearly hotter than others. What really excites you out there beyond the horizon of China and India?
Well, what is exciting is this world is flat with technology can allow most boats to rise with the tide. And the question really is where's not? Middle East and Africa last quarter grew over 50% for us. Russia, CIS, Eastern Europe, Latin America, the combination of all those grew over 40%. India and China are both growing very, very well. And it does speak to the globalization and it not being dominated by one country anymore economically or otherwise. But to come back to your question on India and China, what you saw India celebrate 60 years of independence. You see an unusual combination of leadership from the top all the way through, tolerance of diversity, democracy, intellectual property protection, etc. But it's a partnering nation. And it's amazing. It doesn't matter if you're talking to Infosys or Wipro or Tata or Bharti or others. They think, how do you win together?
Yeah, they play well with others.
Yes, and they have great tolerance of diversity. When the top three leaders are all three from the minority religions. Right. I mean, that wouldn't happen in the U.S. Yeah. And the direction. And so watching what is occurring, all of us understand what's occurring in China in terms of just great economic strength. But the real question of what is hot is really what is not. And I think by the time trends become obvious, if you haven't already got your strategy in pretty good shape in India and China, for most of us in the business world that are not in a new concept market, that are in traditional finance or traditional IT or traditional networking, it's probably too late in terms of position.
When you mentioned the Middle East and a part of the world near and dear to my heart,
Might as well.
Iraq so dominates, the impression of the Middle East today. Yep. But I know whenever I'm traveling around, Jordan, Lebanon, or whatever, I bump into people. They say, "Yeah, John Chambers from Cisco was just here." What are you doing out there?
Well, first, this is an interesting one because for those of the people in the room that have doubt about corporate social responsibility, this takes it from theory to fact. I've always believed the most successful should be the best at giving back. We've done that as a company pretty well. Our network academies, I think you're familiar with them, Tom. We've graduated 2.4 million students around the world in 167 countries.
What do they learn? What does that student know once he or she has graduated?
They know how, at first, to network the devices in their schools, how to maintain them, which is where the real costs are, and then they learn how to apply them to business. So 91% of the graduates use their skills every day. 71% of them continued into higher education, often in IT because of these classes. So they are our way of giving back. But all of a sudden, when King Abdullah in Jordan said, "John, I would like for you to help me in Jordan, both on education, but also on venture capital, job creation, and economic, and I'd like for you to bring some of your peers to do it," he said, "You'll make a lot of money in Jordan. And this is why you always are very careful what you say." I said, "Your Majesty, I will never make money in Jordan and probably not in the Middle East." And today, the Middle East is bigger for us than China. Wow. And we give back in major ways. We led the Lebanon partnership for our government, along with Intel, Microsoft, and Occidental Petroleum. We have 100 interns coming to Cisco to educate them and put them back into Lebanon. We're involved with each of the countries on country transformation. But it also ties back to it's just plain the right thing to do for business. And for those that doubt, if you use your core competency to give back, it's amazing how it benefits business in ways that you never dreamed.
John, before we end, you you have been CEO of Cisco for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your peers, who have either stayed or survived that long,
Mm-hmm.
through so many transitions. If you were writing a book, like Andy Grove, Only the Paranoid Survive,
Mm-hmm.
what would it be called? Would it be Only the Collaborative Survive? What have you learned?
You're better at concepts that will help people grasp from the title and really stimulate the thought process. I would wrap it around 3 elements. The importance of being customer driven. And I believe my customers will always tell me what I need to do, and plenty of time for me to either do it, change what I'm doing, or acquire. The importance of catching market transitions. Because moving into a market that isn't in transition, especially if you don't have a sustainable differentiation, is a recipe for failure. And then it is internet enabled. So it really is about the customer driving your company, identifying market transitions, and the internet enabling new business models, new technology models, etc. And then collaboration has been, I would call it phase 2 of the internet. So much like you do in your books, there's a phase 1, a 2, and a 3, and there definitely will be a 3. But if you were to say to this group, what is the issue that is really dramatically different now versus a decade ago on the internet, it's all collaboration. But collaboration without Web 2.0 doesn't work. Without that virtual meeting capability, any device to any content doesn't work. And so that's where Dr. Greenspan and Laura Tyson, who was Clinton's economic advisor in the mid-90s, were right. If you don't have new ways of innovation, we will be stuck in this 1% to 2% productivity growth. And you're only going to get people to spend if CEOs believe they can grow their productivity as well-run companies at 5% to 10%, not at 1% or 2% or 3%.
John, there's an old saw, and we'll end with this, that Britain owned the 19th century, America owned the 20th century, and China will own the 21st century. And whenever I hear that, my reaction is always, well, maybe. But I'm not ready to cede the 21st century to anyone yet. We're not going to win it by default. We need to get our act together. We need to get our groove back. So I've been writing lately, I think much more than people realize. But I'm still not a bear on America. And partly because I do think in this incredibly flexible, collaborative world, we bring a lot to the table naturally, culturally. I always think when people say, China's on the 21st century, I'm always reminded something that my grandma Friedman, used to say, sitting by the fire in the cold Minnesota winter. And Grandma Friedman used to say, Tommy, never cede a century to a country that censors Google. It was just a little thing Grandma Friedman used to say. And wise lady, Grandma Friedman. I'm interested, John, just to close, how do you feel about America right now? Not at the patriotic level, but what do we need to do to get our groove back, or to make sure that we don't lose the 21st century by default?
It's like a business. When you're losing market share, losing education initiatives, losing the broadband battle, for reasons of feeling good about yourself, to be in denial, all that does, as many of us have learned in business, is cause when you fall to fall harder. It's remarkably similar, and this isn't a recipe for America, this is a recipe for any country, how much the leaders around the world, regardless of their politics, understand the best form of politics is a strong economy with job creation in the middle class. And so the equation to me is a great education system, both universities and K through 12, and our K through 12 you and I have discussed is clearly broken. An environment of infrastructure, which isn't roads and highways, this is broadband. And Senior Minister Lee, Mentor Minister Lee, always gets it right in Singapore. He's put in a gigabit to the home. Not infrastructure. Now, it helps when your son is prime minister and you own Singapore Telecom. But
we have a similar system in this country, actually.
I'm not going to go there. And the third element is, how do you create this identification of market transitions and an environment of innovation? And then it kills me to say this, because I wouldn't have said it a decade ago, supportive government. And I think it is still up for grabs who it is. America has tremendous strengths. You look in the Valley, it still is the only place in the world where you tie the university systems, especially Stanford, to the concepts on it. You tie the venture capital world, where 40% of venture capital at least lands here before it goes somewhere else in the U.S. You have role models like HP that taught us all in the Valley and really care about developing the next generation. And we will often compete in areas with companies and then really work on common goals on it, a workforce that's willing to take risk, etc. But I think it's up for grabs who that is. I would not count out India. They probably understand collaboration and partnering better than any of us. But if you were to say, all right, John, stick your neck way out, who's going to win? I think it's the emerging countries as a group that wins, not U.S., China, or India. But we'll see.
Terrific, terrific. John, thank you so much. This has been a great start to the weekend.
Thank you very much.